She failed the entrance exam twice because the judges wouldn't accept a woman. She took it a third time and became the first female architect to graduate from the world's most elite school. San Francisco, 1872. Julia Morgan was born into a world with very clear rules about what women could do. They could teach, they could nurse, they could marry and raise children. They could not build things. Julia looked at those rules and decided they didn't apply to her. At 18, she enrolled at UC Berkeley to study civil engineering. She was often the only woman in lecture halls packed with men who openly questioned whether she belonged there. Classmates refused to work with her on projects. She graduated anyway in 1894, the only woman in her engineering class. Her mentor, an architect named Bernard Maybeck, told her to do something impossible. Apply to the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, the most prestigious architecture school in the world. There was just one problem. The École des Beaux-Arts had never, not once in its 200-year history, admitted a woman to study architecture. Julia went to Paris anyway. In 1897, after intense pressure from French women artists, the school finally, reluctantly, opened its architecture program to female applicants. Julia took the entrance exam. She failed. She placed 42nd out of 376 applicants. Only the top 30 were accepted. 6 months later, she took the exam again. She failed again. Historians who studied the records later found something disturbing. Julia's scores appeared deliberately lowered. The all-male jury, it seemed, had no intention of letting a woman, especially an American woman, into their program. Most people would have given up. Most people would have accepted that some barriers simply couldn't be broken. Julia Morgan took the exam a third time. This time, she placed 13th out of 392 applicants. The École des Beaux-Arts had run out of excuses. In 1898, Julia became the first woman ever admitted to their architecture program. But there was a final obstacle. Students had to graduate before turning 30. Julia was already 25. She had less than 5 years to complete a program that normally took much longer. She worked relentlessly, often late into the night, while male students socialized. She designed, she studied, she pushed herself beyond exhaustion. In February 1902, 1 month before her 30th birthday, Julia Morgan earned her certificate. She was the first woman to ever graduate in architecture from the École des Beaux-Arts. Julia returned to California expecting opportunities. Instead, she found more barriers. She went to work for architect John Galen Howard, who praised her exceptional talent to colleagues, while telling others he could pay her almost nothing, as it is a woman. Julia overheard that conversation. She saved every penny from her meager salary, made her plans, and quit. In 1904, Julia Morgan became the first woman licensed as an architect in California. She opened her own office in San Francisco, a tiny space, just her and a drafting table. Male architects laughed. Women didn't run architecture firms. She'd fail within a year. Then came April 18, 1906, at 5:12 in the morning. The San Francisco earthquake struck with devastating force. The ground split open. Buildings collapsed into rubble. Fires raged across the city for 3 days. Over 3,000 people died. Nearly 80% of San Francisco was destroyed. But at Mills College in Oakland, something remarkable stood untouched. The 72-foot bell tower Julia had designed, one of her first reinforced concrete structures, hadn't cracked, hadn't shifted, hadn't fallen. All around it, buildings lay in ruins. Hers stood. Suddenly, everyone wanted Julia Morgan. She rebuilt the iconic Fairmont Hotel in under a year, an engineering marvel. She designed over 30 YWCA buildings across multiple states, creating safe spaces for working women. She designed churches, schools, hospitals, private homes. Then in 1919, she got a phone call that would define her career. William Randolph Hearst, the newspaper magnate, wanted to build a little something on his family's ranch in San Simeon. He'd heard about the architect whose buildings survived earthquakes. That little something became Hearst Castle, a sprawling 165-room, Mediterranean-style estate perched on a California hilltop. Julia oversaw every detail personally for 28 years. The hand-painted ceilings, the imported tiles, the indoor and outdoor pools, the gardens. It was her masterpiece. But Julia never sought publicity. While other architects courted fame, she worked quietly. She rarely gave interviews. She destroyed most of her personal papers, believing her buildings should speak for themselves. By the time she retired in 1951, at age 79, Julia Morgan had designed over 700 buildings across California and beyond. She died in 1957 at age 85. And then the world forgot her. Architecture textbooks didn't mention her name. Students studied male architects from her era, while Julia's 700 buildings stood unattributed. Hearst Castle became famous, but few visitors knew a woman had designed it. For decades, her legacy collected dust. Then, in 1988, a biography brought Julia Morgan back into public consciousness. Historians began rediscovering her work. Architects studied her innovative use of reinforced concrete. Preservationists fought to protect her buildings. In 2014, 57 years after her death, the American Institute of Architects awarded Julia Morgan the AIA Gold Medal, their highest honor. She was the first woman ever to receive it. Think about that timeline. The first woman to graduate from the world's top architecture school in 1902. The first woman licensed as an architect in California in 1904. Designer of over 700 buildings, but not recognized with architecture's highest honor until 2014. Not because her work wasn't extraordinary, it was. Not because she wasn't influential, she was. But because she was a woman, and the architecture world had decided that women's contributions didn't count the same way men's did. Julia Morgan never complained publicly about the discrimination. She never gave speeches about gender equality. She didn't march or protest. She just kept building. When they told her women couldn't study architecture, she studied it anyway. When they failed her exam twice, she took it a third time. When they paid her nothing, she saved until she could work for herself. When they doubted her buildings could withstand an earthquake, she let the earthquake prove them wrong. Julia Morgan's legacy isn't just 700 buildings. It's the proof that excellence doesn't need permission. She was told no, again and again and again. She was underpaid, underestimated, and erased from history for half a century after her death. But what Julia Morgan built is still standing. The bell tower at Mills College, the Hearst Castle, the churches and schools and homes across California, and maybe most importantly, the door she kicked open for every woman architect who came after her. She failed twice because they wouldn't accept a woman. She took the test a third time and made history. Then she just kept building.